Hey everybody, some Gadget Guy here, and we've got a fun one for you today because we are wrapping up our long-term hands-on review of the Nokia Lumia Icon on Verizon Wireless. This was a phone that I was so excited to start talking about that when I got one, I was on a trip in New York City and I shot my first impressions of this phone from my hotel room on a beat-up ironing board just so that I could start sharing the experience of using this phone with you guys. And of course, I've already shot a speaker review on the Lumia Icon, see how it compares to other phones, including the HTC One, the Samsung Galaxy S4, etc., etc. And we've already run the Icon through my exhaustive camera test, showing video samples from the Lumia Icon in a variety of different shooting scenarios: low light, outdoors, bright light, macro, using the zoom, etc., etc., etc. Plus, I've got a link down in the description so you guys can also check out high-quality photo uploads from this camera module too. The Icon is something of a unique beast in that it follows Verizon's blockier aesthetic that started on the Lumia 928. Nokia is still sort of paying their dues in the North American market. They kind of left this industry. And now coming back with their Microsoft relationship, they still don't quite have the clout with all the various carriers to not just say, here's our one phone and we're sticking to this one phone. And so the Lumia 928 and the Lumia Icon stray from the rest of the sort of rounded, tapered, more organic, full polycarb unibody designs that we've seen on phones dating back to the original Lumia 900. And the Lumia 900 actually retains one of my all-time favorite smartphone rounded corner design aesthetics. It kind of reminds you of like old Dodge muscle cars. It's a really pretty look, and we've seen it return on phones like the Lumia 1020. On the Icon, however, Nokia has brought in some of the metal edge design elements that we've seen on phones like the Lumia 925. So what we have in the Icon is something of a crossroads device, which gives us these tantalizing little clues as to what a future Lumia 930 or 935 might look like later this year. I mean, chances are pretty good we'll probably see something at build, especially considering that outside of the Lumia 1520, the international audience for Nokia is certainly hungry for some other flagship phone competitor in this space. Remember just a couple years ago when 4.5-inch screen phones were considered ridiculously huge? This 5-inch screen diagonal is becoming pretty much my favorite form factor. I'm not the biggest fan of phablets, but this provides me most of the usage scenario of a super large screen device without being unreasonably large. And it still fits comfortably in the front pocket of my jeans. And here it is opposite my venerable Lumia 1020. This is a 4.5-inch screened phone, and especially note the 2 rows of icons versus the Icon's 3 rows of icons, just due to the lower screen resolution on the 1020. The Icon actually does a pretty good job matching up to the measurements on the HTC One. This is the HTC One M7 from 2013, even though the M7 has the 4.7-inch diagonal screen, that definitely you get some head and chin action from the boom sound speakers located at the top and the bottom. But I gotta throw a little love to LG here, as they have managed to cram a 5.2-inch screen onto the G2 into roughly the same measurements and form factor as the 5-inch screen on the Lumia Icon, and that is just pretty cool engineering. I'm even having trouble holding this phone to show the demonstration, but here is the Lumia Icon opposite its big brother, the Lumia 1520. You can see just how much bigger that 1 extra inch on the diagonal makes for a smartphone versus a phablet. What we have at play with the Lumia Icon is a wonderful example of a premier smartphone build, especially at the time this video was shot just before the release of the HTC One M8 and the Galaxy S5. Metal accents with a polycarb back definitely feels really good in the hand. And the only nitpicky I can levy at this design is that I find that the metal edge corner right here tends to dig into my palm just a little bit more than I would like it to. And that's a really nitpicky criticism, because especially as you start utilizing the amazing camera on the back of this phone, you're gonna come to appreciate these flat metal edges as they give you something just a little bit easier to hold on to, especially compared to the rounded corners and edges on some of our previous Nokia devices. On first impressions, I was really worried that the Icon was going to be a really fat phone. Those blocky edges definitely give it a sense of being a little bit thicker. But I just wanted to show, in comparison to the HTC One and the G2, that it's actually pretty close. It's definitely the thickest of the 3, but it's not as far off as I thought it was going to be until I actually held all 3 of these phones side by side. Surprisingly, the G2 is the thinnest of this lot, and I believe at its thickest, it's only an 8.9 millimeter thick phone versus the 9.8 millimeter thickness of the Icon, and at its thickest, the HTC One, is also a 9.3. So there's only about a half a millimeter difference. A half a millimeter is not a substantial amount of girth to worry about when carrying these phones. Now, obviously, the HTC One and G2 do slightly better jobs of tapering towards the corners for a slimmer feeling of phone, but at their thickest, they're all pretty close to each other. The other nitpicky that I'm gonna levy at this device isn't even Nokia's fault, is that I'm just tired of seeing giant Verizon check marks on the front and back of our phones. I really feel that mars the experience having this much carrier branding on what is otherwise an extremely minimal and modern design. Plus, Verizon, what is up with this checkmark logo? It always looks off-centered no matter where you put it. Nike doesn't have that problem with the big ol' swoosh thing. And as it stands right now, Lumia devices are sporting my absolute favorite screens on any premier smartphone on the market today. This clear black panel is simply phenomenal. And I love AMOLED in general. Like, I really have been a big fan of Samsung panels in the past too, because there's just this really gorgeous contrast ratio and this wonderful saturation at play. And the edges of the screen are almost impossible to detect from the bezels along the sides, as each pixel, when it's displaying black on the screen, is pure off. I mean, it's just a really wonderful effect, which makes the whole screen feel bigger than it actually is. Plus, while it's really difficult for me to demonstrate this, there is a super bright mode built into most Nokia. So even though this is an AMOLED panel, and typically LCDs tend to be a bit brighter, this phone will go into a different contrast mode and then super bright mode whenever it detects that it's in bright light, like sunlight. It makes the entire viewing experience on this phone just a lot easier when you're out and about. Now, that will only work if you're using the automatic brightness. If you're not and you're just using the high brightness, you won't get that super bright mode when you're in direct sunlight. And thankfully, we do have this touch sensitivity control, which allows the screen to go into a high sensitivity mode where it's so sensitive that it can even detect screen touches through gloves. You can wear gloves while using the icon. That definitely came in handy when I was on my recent trip to New York because it was freaking cold outside. It's just an exceptional level of polish for a device these days, where even the ceramic buttons running along this right-hand edge of the phone are fitted very snugly and securely, so you get very little of that rattle. The main rattle coming from the dual stage camera button on the side. It's much quieter than even the buttons on the iPhone 5S. That's just a superb attention to detail when you're competing against Apple in terms of that quality of design. When it comes to day-to-day performance, I just really have a hard time finding fault with Windows Phone in its current state. There are a few of those nitpickies that I hope Microsoft is able to address with Windows Phone 8.1, like having dedicated volume controls. We're still waiting on that, and we absolutely need some kind of universal notification area, especially if we're ever gonna get smartwatch support for our Windows phones. But just as I mentioned in my review of the 1520, moving Windows Phone over to the Qualcomm 800 was an awesome move. And this is an operating system that performed admirably on older generation dual core processors. Moving up to the top of the line Qualcomm 800 chipset means that we just have screaming and extremely fluid performance across the entire operating system, the entire user interface. And while I'm sure that live tile experience is gonna scare some people off just because it's so different than what we're used to in Android and iOS, it really is an elegant solution to navigating a phone UI without getting sued by Samsung or Apple for copying design elements. And now is an excellent time just to look at Windows Phone as an ecosystem, because we can be pretty sure that Microsoft will be polishing it up even just a little bit more in the coming months. A couple handy things to note about the Lumia Icon is that it is an unlocked world phone with a quad-band GSM radio built into it, and I have been able to use the Lumia Icon on AT&T's network. You won't get LTE, but you will get 4G, and you'll still be able to make phone calls and get data, especially for you folks who like to travel. I'm planning on taking only this phone with me on a trip that we're gonna be taking up to Canada soon, and I'll just buy a prepaid SIM when we get up there. Another nice touch with Windows phones that you don't always get with Android devices, while Verizon has actually been pretty conservative with the amount of bloatware that they've put on this device, if there are apps or services that you're just not a big fan of, you can actually remove them. So, for example, this NFL mobile app, that's not really my jam. So I'm gonna long press on this here, and I'm just gonna uninstall it. And it's just as simple as that. There isn't any, you don't have to disable it and then have it live on the device, but buried in the background, it's just gone. For me, Windows Phone has always been a very battery efficient operating system. We know that previous devices like the Lumia 925 have had smaller batteries than some of their Android brethren. The Icon steps this up to a 2400 milliamp hour battery cell, which for the most of my review has gotten me past dinner time. I think for very sort of normal and moderate use, this is gonna be an all-day phone, still gonna be a phone that you have to charge every night. For me, it always came down to whether or not I was using the camera a lot, because this 20 megapixel image sensor paired with one of the brightest AMOLED screens I've ever seen, the super bright mode on the Lumia phones is pretty awesome. But that combo, if used throughout the day, is gonna put a serious hurt on your battery life. But if having that superb photo and video experience is something that you care about, we just have to put up with some of those compromises. And while I've already posted my camera test and samples, I just wanna put this into perspective for you guys that the image sensor in the Lumia Icon is roughly the same size as the image sensor in the Samsung Galaxy camera. And to my eye, the photo rendering software that is included on the Nokia subtly bests the output from the Galaxy camera. That is fantastic performance. And of course, throughout those video tests that I've done on this phone, I definitely want you to pay attention to the audio that this phone records, because the quad microphone array on Lumia smartphones, on the 1520 and on the Icon, is incredible. There's one scene during my video test where I'm over a freeway, and the noise reduction capabilities are so precise that they're scalpeling out all of the engine noise, and you're able to hear car tire noise rolling over the bumps in our torn up California freeway. And if I have to throw one other small knock at Verizon on this, the Icon is only gonna come in black and white. We're not gonna get any of those fun Lumia colors on the Lumia Icon. And I'm telling you folks, you just have not lived until your massive phone matches your awesome headphones. And in a battle against the other carrier branded Lumia smartphone, the 1520 on AT&T, these two phones trade a lot of blows back and forth, but ultimately I veer ever so slightly towards the Icon. And while AT&T's 1520 gives me the ability to add a micro SD card slot, I don't like what that does to the final finish on this device. Is this door is a little rattly and it doesn't fit snugly against the rest of the phone body. Plus, for once, Verizon has fought the urge to hamstring this device in two important ways. First of all, wireless charging is built into this phone based on the QI platform. So if you invested in wireless chargers for the 925, the 920, if you were rocking those sleds on the 1020, this phone has it built in. You just drop it on a little pad, it starts charging. That's awesome. Whereas AT&T is backing PMA now, and they've removed the QI wireless charging from the international version of this phone, requiring you to put some kind of plastic sled on the back, and I think that's a bummer. And also, for some reason, AT&T has removed the DataSense app from their Lumia phones, making it just a little bit more difficult to track your data usage. But it's currently available on the Verizon phone. All told, ladies and gentlemen, this stands as an excellent premier smartphone solution for those of you looking for something a little different, looking for something a little fun, or for those people who genuinely want the best, or technically second best, camera that you can find on any kind of mobile device. And outside of some of those usability and app concerns that you might have just regarding Windows Phone as an ecosystem, the only other knock I can throw at this phone is the fact that it's a Verizon exclusive. So if you're wanting that top tier Windows Phone experience right now at the time this video was shot, and you can't wait for international versions of this phone to come out, it means you have to do business with Big Red. For those of you who enjoy your Verizon service, that's cool, but I'm not a big fan of recommending people switch carriers just for exclusive phones. And with everything this phone has to offer, there's that fingers crossed in the background that hopefully we'll see an international version of this phone bringing all of this amazing tech to the table. So folks, are you using a Lumia? Drop me a comment below. I wanna know how you guys are liking the Windows Phone experience. And those of you who are curious about maybe checking out Microsoft's solution for smartphone mobility, definitely drop me some questions too. I love answering. I love getting into fun conversations and debates with you guys. As always, thank you so much for watching, sharing, subscribing to my channel, leaving me thumbs up. You guys have been awesome to me lately. It's been so much fun to get into this stuff with you guys, and I will catch you all on the next review.